The U.S. declared war on Germany on April 6, 1917, after about 3 years of being a neutral country. The U.S. Army joined the Allies and closely worked with them to defeat the Germans. More than 400,000 soldiers mobilized to the Western Front to aid the British and French Army. After the U.S. joined the war, the tide turned against Germany after being in a stalemate with Britain for almost 3 years. At the beginning of the war, America adopted an isolationist policy. They wanted to preserve economic ties with both Britain and Germany in order to make profit. The thought of making profit from the war soon changed after American ships were destroyed by German unrestricted submarine warfare. The most notable ship sunk by German submarines was the RMS Lusitania, shifting the American public opinion against Germany. Both sides of the conflict realized that American intervention in the war could break through a stalemate in the Allies' favor. As a result, both Germany and Britain called for loyalty from their large immigrant population in the States. This loyalty to the belligerents on both sides resulted in American aversion of entrance into the European theater, lest there be civil strife among U.S. citizens. Knowing that a majority of Americans favored the Allies over the Powers, Germany stopped unrestricted submarine warfare on neutral ships after America threatened the nation with war. Knowing any involvement from the States would lead to German defeat, the German foreign minister sent a telegram to Mexico requesting Mexican assistance in the event that America entered the war against the Powers. In return, Germany would help Mexico reconquer all territory lost to the States. The telegram was intercepted by the British, who waited until renewed submarine warfare by the Germans drove American public opinion against the Powers before releasing it to the States. This ultimately made the public go against the Germans.
However, President Woodrow Wilson was reluctant to declare war on Germany. He opposed joining the war so much that he won his second presidential race with the slogan, "He kept us out of war." Unfortunately, the release of the Zimmerman telegram inflamed the American public. At this point, Wilson ultimately decided that the war was inevitable. Therefore, he devised a plan to follow after the war, summarized in his 14 points. The first of Wilson's points states that diplomacy shall proceed always and frankly in the public view. Simply, he is saying that all secret treaties, sections of treaties, and understandings are to be prohibited. All diplomacy from that moment henceforth had to be transparent. The second point maintained that the right to free navigation of the seas under three conditions: general peace, general war, entered by the League of Nations against an outlaw nation, or a war in which the League of Nations remains neutral. The third point insisted that a nation within the League could not discriminate against other signatory powers, putting all League members on the same basis. This meant a nation could still have a tariff or other form of economic restriction legally, as long as it was applied to all League members, or the world, equally. The fourth point argued for the removal or reduction of armaments in nations consistent with the domestic safety. The fifth point states that all decisions made concerning colonial claims during the war were to be impartial. The sixth point states that the German army would leave Russian territory, of which the majority would be reclaimed by Russia. However, it is made clear in this point and in point 13 that the Poles, Finns, Lithuanians, and Lets would represent themselves in provisional governments to assist in creating the Russian political setup. The seventh point simply states that Belgium's independence will be restored. In the eighth point, Wilson declares that all French territory will be free of any kind of occupation and that Alsace-Lorraine would again fall under French sovereignty. The ninth point states that all of Italy's borders should be drawn along ethnic lines. Therefore, it reduces the amount of land under Italian rule in Europe. The 10th point states that Austria-Hungary be divided by ethnic divisions as to allow each ethnic group to practice self-determination. The 11th point states that the Balkan states be allowed to practice self-determination and have their independence guaranteed. The 12th point concerns the dividing of the Ottoman Empire. It limits Turkish rule to Anatolia and any other location with a Turkish majority. All other people who previously lived under Turkish rule in the Ottoman Empire will live in nations according to their ethnicity. The 13th point states that Poland will be made into a nation where there are undisputably high Polish populations and guarantees the nation access to the sea, political and economical independence, and respect to territorial integrity. The League of Nations, the principle of whom Wilson detailed in his speech of September 27, 1918, was to be formed with the intention of guaranteeing political and territorial independence of all nations. There were about 400,000 men in the U.S. Army when the war began. In order to gather an army that could defeat the Central Powers, the U.S. had used various forms of propaganda to recruit men. On May 18, 1917, Congress passed the Selective Service Act. This federal conscription applied to all men between ages of 21 through 30. Later, the act required a larger range of men to register for military service from 18 to 45 years. American propaganda not only focused on pulling able men into the army, but on encouraging people back at home to contribute to the war effort through different means. A large portion of the propaganda posters focused on reminding citizens not to waste vital resources, specifically rationed foods such as wheat and fats. Another huge effort were the Victory Gardens. Victory Gardens were vegetable, fruit, and herb gardens grown on any available private or public land. They boosted civil morale and became a part of daily life on the home front. By the end of the war, there were over 5 million gardens in the States, with foodstuff production exceeding $1.2 billion. The Boy Scouts of America sold over 352 million of war bonds along with 101 million war savings stamps. On the battlefield, American troops were arriving just as Russia was pulling out. The first battle in which American soldiers participated was the Battle of Cambrai, taking place in late November to early December of 1917. 3 American engineer regiments were called to the front lines after widespread French mutinies and a crack in the British offensive. American troops were more involved in the war in 1918. They were very important on March 21, 1918, when Germany launched a huge attack on the Western Front. Then, U.S. troops fought in the Asian Marne campaign, which included the Battle of the Cantigny, Chateau Thierry, and Belleau. One of the most important campaigns where U.S. involvement was essential was the Meuse-Argonne campaign. In this campaign, the troops fought between the Meuse River and the Argonne Forest. There were 600,000 soldiers fighting, and many suffered casualties. Fighting stopped on November 11, 1918, when an armistice went into effect between Germany and the Allies. The United States' involvement in World War I was very brief, but it was very important for the success of the Allies. A major reason that the U.S. entered the war was to make the world safer democracy. Although the U.S. did not completely accomplish this goal, they definitely had a great impact on the world during this time.